Hello and welcome to another episode of Loyalty Chats with Tom, a series of informative and engaging podcasts of around 15 minutes, perfect for your coffee break, lunchtime, or your journey home. We provide interesting loyalty insight into the development of the sector, and all our discussions are focused on where the industry is going next. Today, I'm joined by Ben Stirling from Capillary Technologies, an enterprise loyalty platform provider with a global customer base. Welcome, Ben. It's great to have you on today.
Hi, Tom. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Maybe you could just introduce yourself to our community. That would be great.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name's Ben Stirling. I work for Capillary Technologies, where we provide loyalty and engagement solutions for many brands around the globe, as you say. Prior to that, I've been working in loyalty about 5 years and worked mainly within financial institutions and with retailers. Before that, I was actually in hospitalities, where I got into that kind of loyalty sphere, was working with Expedia, mainly securing their B2B partnerships for them. But that got me working with a number of airlines like Norwegian, and we were incorporating points and loyalty within the hotel booking engine that we were providing. And then prior to that, I was actually in e-commerce. So one of the very early adopters in kind of SEO, PPC, social media marketing.
Oh, wow.
Been around consumers' behavior, always been around, online, whether it's acquisitions, conversions, or retention, but went from kind of, sales side of e-com to loyalty, retention, and customer engagement.
Perfect. Thank you. So that's great. Great intro. But today, actually, we're not really going to talk too much about you and your background. We are going to talk about the psychology of loyalty and some of the techniques used to influence customers and members within a program. So I know that you're going to take us through this in a little bit of a change to our normal format on these podcasts, where we're actually going to do a presentation. So over to you, please. Just go ahead, share your screen. We'll just
Yeah,
take a moment while you do that, and then please take us through this fascinating subject.
absolutely. I will share now potentially the most challenging part of all of the stuff we're going to talk about today is just sharing my screen. Um, but today we're going to talk about behavioral economics, with a slight focus really in on online, so looking at conversion and retention strategies, both of which that apply to the loyalty sphere. This is a topic, and just for a caveat, I am not an economist, and I'm actually not a psychologist, although I have studied a lot of it. Human behavior and decision making has always been really a core part of the role I play, and what we're working with brands to achieve. So understanding consumer behavior just became a real fascination topic for me. And the more I learned, the more I wanted to learn. And here we are today. So what I want to start with is the very simple question, which is, what is behavioral economics? And I really like, as much as my image there of a kind of little pig brain, which is ultimately the point, which is that behavioral economics is really the combination of psychological studies into human decision making that result in an economic outcome. One of the key things that really influences our decision making, and a lot of that actually was believed, this kind of started in the 20th century. There was a couple of key people within that, like Richard Taylor was one of those. He really popularized this subject. He also coined what is known as the kind of nudge theory, or nudges. So it's been around for a while, but it's really grown in popularity. And one of the key things that we're going to look at today is there are over kind of 200 biases. So if you like, favorable ways in which the way that we think. And those biases really affect not only how we make decisions, but how we feel and how we act as human beings. A lot of this is relatively irrational. And as I say, we like to think of ourselves as quite rational beings, but we really aren't when it comes down to kind of taking the hood off and having a look under the engine. Super relevant to the loyalty sector, as
Mm.
most programs are designed to change a consumer behavior. That might
Yeah.
be to purchase more of your products, it might be to stay longer or become a more valuable customer, but ultimately that's what we're all looking to achieve. So it's very powerful when it comes to the, assisting, whether it's acquisition of new customers into your program, the engagement of customers when they're in your program, or retaining and keeping those customers longer. So
Yeah. I think
So I,
that's.
sorry, go
I think you're absolutely right there. I think the psychology of selling, the psychology of marketing, etc. But I think there is definitely a psychology of loyalty. Many of these biases and heuristics can be used within a loyalty program. But I'm hoping that you're not going to go through all 200 today, right?
I will spare you and just do maybe three.
Okay.
Um, but I will give the kind of links and the guide as to where you can find all of these, because as a marketer, absolutely critical to understand these. And this is kind of the title of this, really, right? Which is start with human decisioning versus technology. A lot of times when I meet, whether it's brands or individuals looking to create even if their first point in loyalty, they start with the technology requirements, like, well, who are the best in the market, who should I speak to? And really the first question is what kind of behavior do I want to create? And one of the key ways of creating behavior or needing to understand human behavior is behavioral biases. As I mentioned, these are the kind of preferences that we have in thinking and emotions in specific situations. I'll give you one example. So evidence shows that when we hit what are called nine-enders numbers, so simply numbers that end with 9, 29, 39, even 49, not there just yet, we tend to make more ambitious, out of characteristic and extreme decisions. So this is quite powerful, because if you understand this and you understand a lot about your customers, you will know that they will tend to make more extreme decisions depending on what age they are. I can admit that when I hit 39, I may or may well have not bought myself a Mustang when I hit this number. It's a little bit stereotypical, but
Well,
that
I'm looking forward to hitting the big 3-9. I mean, obviously, you know that I'm only 22 years of age, so I've
exactly.
got a long way to go. But yeah, I'm glad you've said that right at the start of this slide. You said there that this is about the behaviours you're looking to change, and that's great, because when the loyalty people, when we're talking to brands about their innovating their strategy, we always say start with the customer and work out what behaviour you're trying to change. So yeah, I think this feeds in really well. Thanks for that great segue.
Exactly. And I look forward to your 29th birthday. I and so probably the key last part here is that once you start to learn what these biases are and these favorable ways of thinking, you can start to utilize what are quite commonly known as nudges in order to trigger these behaviors and create what we would term in loyalty as more valuable behavior or consumer behavior. So I think one of the key things to really start and take another look back on is that traditional thinking versus kind of modern thinking. And traditional thinking, actually, and this is when it was kind of first disrupted in that kind of late 20th century, was that we made a lot of decisions in a rational way. I'll give you an example of a rational thinking, because I'm actually quite a rational buyer when it comes to all things, obviously, clearly, other than cars. But when I'm purchasing clothes, I look at it in three sections: the needs you have, the specification of what you need, and then the value of it. So is it within what I would deem as a rational kind of pricing structure? Is it not overpriced, not underpriced? It's in the right level. So if I am cold, I will say I need a jacket, and then I will go into the shop. I will look for a specification, which is a jacket that fits, and then I will check to see if it's relative on the price point scale, maybe do a comparison, and then I will make that decision. It's a very rational decision. I'll do evaluation, and I'll do consideration, and then I'll make the purchase. What we realized, or what marketers realized kind of as this research and study came out, is that we're actually not that rational, and that emotional buying is actually a very dominant force. Now we all know that, because we see things like Instagram. I coin this into three sections, which is we see, we love, and we buy. My wife, I might put, and I'll say that quietly, on the more remote scale. I will receive 20 notifications on Instagram about something. She'll say, just ignore it, I'm bookmarking, and then I've already bought it. To me, that's like the opposite way in which I purchase, but for her, that's how she tends to purchase a lot of clothing.
Yeah.
So, when we look at how consumers are making decisions, you should definitely evaluate both of these things, right? You should seek to solve for people's rational thinking and their emotional thinking. There was a great book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which really talked about system one being this more, I'd call, rational process, or, slower cognitive decision making. And then, sorry, in system one, two, and then system one was this more kind of emotional, kind of short-term fast thinking, they called thinking fast. When you look at it like that, it makes obviously a lot of sense. One is much more fast thinking, one is much more considered thinking. And when you split those two things out, you can really help customers make decisions, particularly around purchasing or acquisitions, with understanding or meeting the needs of both of those two things.
Yeah, I think that's I think this overlaps really well into the loyalty sector, and what's happening right now and into the into the future with loyalty is that many brands are looking for experiential design and emotional connections with their members. And this is a big trend within the sector. It used to be, all about your air miles, your points, etc., that rational benefit, financial deferred benefit. But actually, it's becoming more, and that is still valid. I'm not saying that that goes away, but the emotional connection is becoming more and more important within program design. So this particular this traditional way of thinking, traditional versus modern way of thinking, is coming into loyalty more and more, I feel.
Absolutely. I think banking is a brilliant example where they all talk about moving from a transactional or card-based relationship into an emotive one.
Mm,
Something that, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, a bank would never have considered the thought of having an emotive relationship, other than maybe in the branch itself with the cashier, but it wasn't certainly part of the strategy.
yeah,
So I think now that is absolutely the strategy. And as
absolutely.
you say, combination is critical. So I'm going to talk about three common conversion biases today. And by conversion, I really mean enabling someone to take an action or a decision. Um, I picked particularly common ones because what I want is for you to think, yes, these are incredibly obvious now, but they will be things that you see on a common basis, but maybe haven't considered them in the framework of behavioral economics. So von Restov effect, this was wonderful research done by Hedwig von Restov, German philosopher, psychiatrist, and she did a study that was looking at what they called the isolation effect. I'm going to take you through these in more detail, but really the prominence of a single item when it was made different to stand out increased memory retention for it, but also increased the significance of it. So again, you'll see some examples in a minute, very powerful when used correctly and quite commonly utilized now. Present bias, what better example do we need than something I've got for you on Amazon about the self, gratification in short term, particularly around delivery, priming and anchoring. So really looking at, how in priming an event or situation can influence a further future decision or event and situation. So all of these three are very common. You'll see these a lot in e-commerce. You'll see them outside of that as well. But I want to go through these three today. There are 200, so I've really been kind and so let's look at von Restov because this is really really important, particularly in the online sphere, particularly the rise of subscription products, right? ARR, like reoccurring revenue, really valuable to organization businesses. But when you position something like Dropbox do, it meets both the irrational and emotional decision making, and that's you're doing that by making one a recommendation, right? They have the little best value thing. They're telling you what they think is the best thing for you to buy. A little bit like social proofing, which is a bias that basically, if we go on TripAdvisor, we're doing that to get other people's opinions and to validate our own in order to make what would be then a rational decision, but through validation of others. So here they're doing the same thing, right? They're recommending a product of the highest perceived value. What you should be thinking about with this is making it too good an offer to ignore. If you look at the essentials package, £16.58 a month, right? That is the core base one user package. So how come for the next package up, the business package, which enables 3+ users, I can get that for £12? The answer is in the next bit, which says / per user per month. Obviously, what they're doing here is making comparative then to what would be your business plus, which is £18 per user a month. The business package here seems incredibly good value, right? It's cheaper than me taking out the essentials package, but the benefit to Dropbox is now they have you on a journey. You're getting more features, right? You've got 2 additional features. Setup is one of those. And then what that means is you're more likely to incorporate or bring in more users because you have that ability. They can message you about incorporating additional users so they can upsell you, and therefore their total lifetime value to you as a consumer will increase very quickly or exponentially. So again, offer is too good to resist. It's isolated by being marked with the little green icon. Sometimes this is even highlighted more obviously, but what you're looking to do here is isolate what you want people to do outside of the pack, and second, make an offer that's too good to refuse. This really plays on that bias of von Restorff, which is about isolation and making a decision really easy for someone. The rational part is met by the pricing. The emotional part obviously is met by the value that you're getting, by the perceived value of that as well. So that's the first one. Present bias. So who does this better, as I said, than Amazon? I picked on 3 of the things that they display on their checkout, right? Present bias is really that point around we will favor things that create instant gratification. It's why we love our mobile phones. It's why we love like Instagram or Insta gratification, as I like to call it. Likes, all of these things are releasing dopamine into our brain. They feel good when we achieve them. Present bias is not dissimilar. It means we're going to get that feel good feeling sooner. Our brain recognizes that. If you think about this from your everyday life, procrastination is probably the opposite of present bias, right?
Yeah.
We will tend to favor putting off things that have, even if it's a higher value, putting off things that have a longer ability to receive that kind of dopamine hit than things that have a short-term bias. And that's why we pick up our phones. That's why we buy things on Amazon, because it's meeting a very specific need, which is present bias. There are 3 things I've pulled out here. Get it tomorrow, order before 5 p.m. Or within 6 hours to get it tomorrow. So they're really reaffirming when you have to take an action to get the present bias, and then buy now. And the only thing, sorry, I know you want to ask, is
No, sorry.
I would just add on the bottom of that is Klarna doesn't operate with Amazon, but one of the wonderful things when Klarna came across, which really was an enabler for a lot of brands, right, was the fact that you no longer had to wait for an item, but you also didn't even have to wait to have the money to get the goods.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is an interesting one because I think instant gratification, again, is an emerging trend, I think, within loyalty. Although, well, I don't know if it's really emerging, but it continues to grow. It's been around for a good few years now, where people want the instant benefit right now, and I think we have a lot of examples of it in the marketplace. The membership pricing across the grocers and brands like Boots, etc., is really a good example of this, where people are not so excited by that deferred reward. It used to be, oh, collect your grocery points all year, and they'll be worth something really good in 6, 12 months' time. So it's a promise of a reward in the future for your ongoing loyalty. But nowadays, people just want that reward right now. So brands are starting to change that up, membership pricing or birthday offers, things like that, that just create that instant hit. And I think you're absolutely right. These are great examples here from Amazon, and it's happening so much in loyalty as well.
Definitely. And I think that's right back to our beginning point about understanding, who is my customer? What behavior do I want from them? And therefore recognizing, and you'll see this when I get to the end, but what is the combination of these biases that I need to implement in order to create that, valuable, sticky customer that I want? And it isn't, to your point, these tactics again can be quite specific to driving a conversion right now, but under no illusion, we're all aware that even if you look down at the bottom there, Amazon is very good at recommending what I should purchase next,
Yeah.
right? They're already doing what is going to be our next example of primering and anchoring. They're already getting me ready for what should be my next decision and purchase. And they'll consistently do that, and allow you to save it, put it in your wish list and all the other things.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that brings us to priming and anchoring because I like this a lot. I think priming for me is one of the most interesting things, and um, I've been to see a number of psychologists who, or even people like, on the television that use priming a lot to influence people's decision making. Darren Brown was used to use priming as a technique a lot, right? To create a behavior from someone they hadn't even realized that they were almost doing, right? And really it's the idea that you get exposure to one stimuli may influence a response to a subsequent stimuli, right? I'll give you a really simple kids example. Get someone to say silk 10 times. I won't ask you to do it now, but like, if you say silk, 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 and then I say to you, what do cows drink? You'll say milk, right? Because what I've done is simply prime your brain into a pattern. And then when I ask you a quick question and you ask you to answer quick, you'll just say milk, right? So we know cows don't drink milk. We know that hopefully they drink water.
Mm.
Otherwise, that would be very odd. Um, but that's just a very simple childlike example of how priming is really powerful. About 75% of retailers use priming, and particularly anchoring as well. And let me just touch on anchoring because then I'll wrap them both together. So priming is important because priming is, as I said, is something that we're influencing a decision in the future, right? Anchoring is where you're positioning then the first bit of information that we see, and that influences your overall decision. Now, the important thing to reference here is that we have a big tendency to over rely on the first piece of information that we're offered. Even in the event that that information is irrelevant, it will impact our final decision making. So this is important. I've used a particularly extreme example, £65 reduced to £9. Wow, what a deal. I mean, unbelievable, right? But the reality is I know it was never £65, but it doesn't matter. If that's the first pricing I see, here they're together, but if that's the first price I see, that is where my anchor is set. There is a, if you like, a weighting or a variance between that anchor point in which I will deem is back to my rational thinking a good value purchase. So even if I know it's rubbish, even if I know it's not true, it's why retailers were told off for using or overutilizing this. I won't name them, but they were, because it is incredibly impactful for our overall decision making when we go to make the purchase. We will rationalize the purchase based on the fact we got a discount.
Yeah,
But
I think
two things together.
it's
Sorry, yeah.
yeah, it's an interesting one, anchoring, isn't it? Do you think though that people are actually anchoring these days because we're much more savvy and there's much more information about offers, etc. And people have been doing it a long time, so we know that the supermarkets will rotate these offers and other brands outside of grocery as well. You only have to wait for a while and that offer will be back. So do you think that people kind of anchor at a specific um, level? So I'll give you an example from my point of view is that I um I I live near a sort of designer village thing, and I know that I won't name the brand, but a big famous
Big
jeans
one.
brand, they will do a 3 for 2 once or twice a year, and I'm now at the point where I just wait for that. I don't buy denim until that deal is on, and then I go and get my 3 for 2. So I've almost gone the other way. I have anchored at the 3 for 2 deal. And do you think that anchoring kind of works in that way as well?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, it's all based on the first piece of information you see, and I
Yeah,
think what you've learned is now a habitual behavior, which is ultimately the goal of all of this, which is to
yeah,
create behaviors that, if they're repeated, become habitual. So what they are doing, arguably, is securing you buying their product on a
a-
frequent basis. Ideally,
absolutely.
you
Yeah,
maybe wouldn't pay at that lower price. But to your point, what's happened is you've got an anchor point, which is here is the normal price. And now you've understood that if you commit to a particular behavior, you can get it at the lower value. That your anchor is still referencing, and the rationale decision making is still referencing the original price. You buy it because you know it's a good deal. Maybe it isn't a good deal. Maybe it costs them a half the price that they're selling it at in the sale for to create the product. But it doesn't matter. The anchor is set. So to your point, yeah, it probably does go both ways, but absolutely, it's brought together. These two things super impactful, right?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And then I want to wrap it all together for you, mindful of time, and I know we have to be within our 15 minutes, but one of my
Oh, I actually wouldn't worry. I think we're well over, but don't worry about it because this has been fascinating. So we'll do an exceptionally long one just this once.
Thank you. One of my guilty pleasures, and I think I think one of the most intelligent utilization of behavioral economics is this well-known brand that sells hamburgers, fries, and milkshakes and other such things. They are very savvy with this. It's very subtle, but it's very powerful. They utilize nudging very well. They utilize anchoring very well. And my point here is that you can bring all of these biases together into your own flavor, or in my example, into your own burger. So I picked on chunking, anchoring, framing bias, and present bias. Present bias is a no-brainer for a fast food restaurant because are you hungry? Yes, great. I can get you the food within a relatively short time. Big part of our decision making is already made for us in the very term of fast food. But let me pick on some of the others. Chunking bias is really our ability to only hold around 7 things in our cognitive like thinking at any one time, right? So the idea behind this is that in our cognitive memory that you want to reduce the amount of information. I mean, their menu is extensive now, very extensive, but it wouldn't seem like that if you visited for the first time because on their board, this is an example I took only in the airport a week and a half ago. There are only 6 to 7 items on the meal board. This is exactly the same if you go onto their electronic screen, which is the little circle above that, 6 burgers. The first thing you press when you press it, 6 burgers. Now, the reason they're doing this is because they're playing it within your ability to process information. They're trying to keep you within that fast thinking system and make the decision very easy for you. Too much information. Now I have to load up system 2. This is a bit of a cognitive process. Okay, I need to really think about this. They don't want you to have to think about it. They want it to be very easy. So they limit the amount of information on the main display board and on the computer screens to what we call chunking. Airlines use chunking all the time. When you're booking flights, hotels, cars, if they don't chunk information into consumable, like if you like blocks, it can become very complicated to actually book a holiday. So they have to do it in order for you to be able to process it, make a decision. Yes, I've got the right components. Yes, I've got the right dates, book my holiday. The second thing they do well is anchoring bias, right? This is subtle, but the first thing you will typically see on their display board are the signature meals. The signature meals are comparatively more expensive than all other meals. This is important because you might not want the signature meal because you might be like me and you love a specific burger every time you go there called the Mac something. But ultimately, I'm anchoring my price on the signature meal, which is more expensive. So everything else beyond that looks like value because it is at a lower price point, right? It's very subtle, but it's consistent. They typically have signature meals quite high up on the board when you go in to now buy on the electronic dashboard. Framing is where they get really good. So this is framing bias, right? This is about how you present information will determine how well it is received or the decision that someone makes next. The Big Mac, this I was clearly, you can tell, was actually down Australia, New Zealand way. The Big Mac there was $8.30. What you can see on that bottom image is that they don't add the 2 things together when you add increments. And in this case, that's cheese. All they display is the price of burger. And then do you want extras? Cheese, £1. Gherkins, whatever, 30 cents. The reason they do this is it's a bit like when you're buying a car. If you're buying a car for £50,000 and someone says, do you want me to add a really fancy, 2 grand stereo to it? When you're looking to pay that off over time, the 2 grand for the stereo doesn't really seem like a lot. If you went to a shop and someone said, I've got a stereo for you and it's £2,000, you'd be like, well, I'm not going to buy a 2 grand stereo for the car. So it's really about the framing. What they're doing is they're not changing the core price of the burger, but they're offering you what seems like a relatively low amount, £1 or $1 actually in this case, as an increment to the cost. So framing, really important, especially when you consider your price structure. And then, as I said, present bias. So wrapping all these things together, and McDonald's use a whole lot more than this. This is just scraping the surface for them. Even their priming, right? What I've started to look at with them is how close or proximity their advertising boards are in relation to their stores. because what they're doing is priming you. You see the burger, you then suddenly go, oh my God, there's McDonald's. Should we go and get one? Right? It's all part of the intelligence behind that. Fascinating. I could talk about that for way too long, so I will pause. So that's it. Summary, wrap it up for you. Framing, products both rationally and emotionally, super important, right? I broke that into chunking as well. When you're thinking about how you're framing, think about chunking. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 is about the main amount of things that people can hold in that kind of cognitive memory at any one time. Recommend and isolate things. So that's the von Restov, right? Give them that fully loaded option, which is just a complete no-brainer. Isolate it, recommend it, social validation. Everyone else has bought this in the last 10 minutes. You've seen all of these techniques, but they do have an impact on decision making. And then the final thing is anchoring and priming. Obviously, if you want to influence those future decisions, think about what you want them to see first. If you want them to see that it's 50 points for making a transaction on this travel site, but then when they get through to the product or the holiday page, it's now 1,000. It's the same example you gave. You can start with a low value and then show something greater, because now they think, oh my gosh, the perceived value now is I get 1,000 for this hotel, right? It's all in the way that you use anchoring and priming. Really important what you show them first. And with that, I will stop talking.
Perfect. You know what? That is really interesting, and I think there's some obvious applications for the loyalty industry. So I'm hoping that all our viewers found that really informative. But where do the viewers go if they need a bit more information on behavioral economics?
So I'm going to give you two really easy things to look at. One is Wikipedia. Wikipedia hosts pretty much, I think, over 200 biases now. If you just type it in, you'll find it. It's not organized in a particularly neat way, but it gives you all of the biases that are available. So as I mentioned at the beginning, think of this like a menu. You want to start looking and picking out what behaviors do I want, what biases will create that behavior, and therefore what do I want to consider in the technologies I utilize to create it. And really, that's where you want to start. And then the other one is a wonderful book I read quite early on in my journey with this, which was called Hooked by Ryan Hoover. It was co-written actually, Ryan and a guy called Ner, and they basically created this book. And I would distill it down to what are called this cyclical cycle, where they talked about creating habit-forming behaviors, and again, hooked. But it was around the triggers you utilize, the actions that you create, the variable rewards based on the actions you create, and then how you optimize for that. And that cyclical cycle goes around. Fantastic book. Highly recommend it if you haven't read it.
Yeah, perfect. I haven't, so I will get a copy. That sounds excellent. Thank you. So, yeah, I think this has been an excellent discussion. We've highlighted some really important key psychological triggers that influence customers. It's a very important trend within loyalty, especially as programs look for more emotional connections with members. Behavioral economics is a vast and extremely interesting subject, and I know that our viewers can learn a lot from the key topics that you've shown us here. In particular, how to influence consumer behavior in relation to engagement and purchase. So I know that there's lots more techniques, but I think we've covered some of the really crucial ones today. So thank you very much for coming on. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Pleasure. And thanks to all our viewers. Hope that you really enjoyed the content. We'll see you all next time.